Hi, I'd like to talk to you today about something that a lot of Gaelic learners find confusing, but I don't really think it's that complicated, and I hope that what I'm going to show you will help you understand it a little bit better. So I'm sure at some point you're likely to have seen changes like this. If you have the Gaelic for bread, aran, but then you have the Gaelic for a bread knife, that's scian arain, and here at the end there's an extra I, which makes a subtle difference. So aran, scian arain. There's a subtle, small difference in pronunciation. It's much more easily seen in the written form. Now, you may already know that this change is what we call the genitive or the genitive case. Now that word is kind of unfamiliar and a little bit scary to most English speakers. It's not scary to ancient Romans. In fact, to ancient Romans, it actually means a lot. So the gen here in genitive is the same as the gen in words like genetic, because it's something we are born with. In fact, while the genitive case has many different uses, one of them is the fact that in Latin it was used to say who your father was. In essence, all this fancy word really means is who's your daddy. It was used by the Romans because it meant something to them, and it just gave them a label to hang on something that was a bit of an abstract concept without it. It's unfortunate that today we continue to use the Latin word even though it doesn't have the same meaning to us as learners as it does to speakers of Latin. Now, I don't know any Latin myself, but I have been told that the Gaelic genitive is used very, very similarly to the Latin genitive. And indeed, I can tell you for a fact that the Gaelic genitive is used in that same sense of who's your daddy. This is clearly visible if you look at a lot of traditional Gaelic names. Donachug, for example, is the Gaelic for Duncan. But there is also the surname Mach Ronnachi. Mach means son, and we have two changes here at the start and the end. Donachug becomes Ronnachi, Mach Ronnachi, the son of Duncan. Now, the parson in Gaelic is am person. I know that sounds a lot like person in English, but believe me, that's parson, am person. And if you know the name Macpherson, the Gaelic for that is Mach a Fersin, which means the parson's son. Again here, like with Macronnachi, we have Macha Fersin, so the change at the start and the end, because these are both in the who's your daddy genitive form. So that is the genitive doing its core job, the who's your daddy, telling us who was born of which mother or father. But it does other jobs, as I said earlier. Now in English we have three different forms that are equivalent to the genitive. So if we start with our example of Donachug, we had Mach Ronnachi, which in English would be Duncan's son. So that's the possessive, where Gaelic uses the genitive. Now, here, this has that same who's your daddy meaning, but we could have possessives in English which don't. For example, Duncan's house. So Duncan's house doesn't have any father-son relationship. And again in Gaelic, this just comes down to the same genitive. And if Mac Runnachi is Duncan's son, then of course Tai Runnachi would be Duncan's house. Okay? The same, of course, goes with the other example we had there. We had Mac a Fersen. Mac a Fersen. Meaning the parson's son. And using the same structure, possessive in English, genitive in Gaelic, we could of course come up with a phrase for the parson's house, which would of course be Tai a Fersen. Okay, so that's the possessive in English is equivalent to the Gaelic genitive. Now, an example I gave you earlier of a bread knife. So this is our second equivalent in English. It's what they call the classifier noun. So a classifier noun is when we take one noun and we use it to give more information about another. The example, of course, as I said, being bread knife. So if I have my bread knife, the first noun, bread, gives me more information about the second noun, knife. So what is the knife for in this case? What is it used for? In Gaelic, as I showed you before, that would be scian arin, whereas bread on its own is aran. So here again, our classifier noun in English is a genitive noun in Gaelic. That leaves us with one other category in English, which I always exemplify with the same phrase. The father of the bride. Now, of course, the father of the bride is essentially in meaning the same as the bride's father. But there's something extra in the father of the bride. It feels a little bit more ceremonial, a little bit more ritual, a little bit fancier than if we were just to say the bride's father. Now again, this comes down to the same genitive in Gaelic. So there's a common error that starts to creep in here that a lot of learners will make. Before looking at that though, I'd like to just go back and look at something that hopefully you'll find a little bit more simple, something you've probably already looked at if you've done any Gaelic so far at all. So I'm going to ask a simple question. What is the Gaelic for a white house? And what is the Gaelic for a red apple? Okay. as I say, hopefully most of you will know this. And hopefully you'll have said tai gal and ual Gaelic. Because, as you know, the order in Gaelic is different from English. So tai is house and ual is apple. And white is gal and red is Gaelic. So in English we have a white house. In Gaelic we have a house white. In English we have a red apple. In Gaelic we have an apple red. If you've been learning for some time, this may already feel completely natural to you, and it may be something you do without thinking, because the word order in Gaelic is and always has been different from in English. So this brings us back to the examples we had earlier, because in English we have a bread knife, and in Gaelic we have scian arin. So an English bread knife is a Gaelic knife bread. The order changes. And we had Duncan's house in Gaelic was tai Gonnachi. So, Duncan's house in English, house Duncan's in Gaelic. The same word order change that happens with a white house to a house white happens with Duncan's house to house Duncan's, tai Gonnachi. So far so good. This seems fairly straightforward, hopefully. This is a rule you already know. It's just something that's being used in a slightly different context. So let's have a look now at one of our other examples from earlier. We had the parson's house. Which was tai a fair sign. So again, we have the same switch. In English, it's the parson's house. In Gaelic, it's house the parson. This starts to seem strange because as an English speaker, you are used to hearing the word the at the very start of the phrase, no matter how long it is. The parson's brother's wife's son's dog's bone. 6 nouns, the at the very start. But it's at the very start because it's tied to the first noun. But the first noun in English is the last noun in Gaelic. The stays with that noun. So even though it appears somewhere else in the sentence, it is really in the same place. It is doing the same thing. It is sticking with the parson. Because if we were to take away the parson and call him by name, let's call him Ian. Ian's house. Tai Ian. The has disappeared. Ian's brother's wife's son's dog's bone. There's no the there at all. The parson is Ian. It's one thing. So where Ian goes, the parson goes. It's the same. It's the same as the language that most of you watching this know better than any other language in the world. In fact, it may currently be the only language you know. And if it's the same, why do so many learners have a problem? Well, quite often what happens is people get confused by that last structure that I was talking about. The father of the bride. And then they'll look at this, the parson's house, and think of it as the house of the parson. Now suddenly we have the appearing twice. And then when attempting to translate that, a lot of learners will try to translate the twice. But there is no the house of the parson because there is no of here. Tai a person is the parson's house. So if you are ever asked to translate something of this form, the X of the Y, the first thing you've got to do is remind yourself that this is not a pattern in Gaelic. This is a pattern in English. There is no father of the bride. There is only the bride's father. So you take that, the X of the Y, and remind yourself that this is really Y's X. And that in Gaelic, the order is different. And then eventually you will find yourself with Mac a fersing. And you will have the parson's son, not the son of the parson. Now, obviously, me telling you this today is not going to fix it in your brain. You're not going to know it now and never make that mistake again. What I'm hoping is that this has clarified the meaning of the structure, and that then as you continue practicing and continue learning, this will slowly help you internalise the correct form. I have seen far too many learners who have struggled with this over the years because they're fixated on this X of the Y. That's not Gaelic. This is the Gaelic. So all that's left is for me to say tap alive. Thank you all very much for your time. If there's anything there that wasn't clear, please do leave a comment down below. I will be looking to re-record this short lesson at some point in the future to try to make it a little bit clearer based on any feedback that you guys have, any points that you think could be dealt with clearer, anywhere you think there's more examples. Okay, well, I'll see you sometime soon with another short lesson on Gaelic. Cheers and drasta.